Hey gang! As we draw ever closer to the release of Squadron 42, I felt it might be high time I took a realistic view of what I think this game will and won't be. Basically just my hopes, dreams, and let's say expectations for Squadron 42. And no, at this time, I no longer think Squadron 42 will release this year. And I'll get into that too. So if that sounds good, let's get this. Actually, let's start with the last one. I've been saying for a while that I figured Squadron 42 would be dropping at the end of this year, so think Christmas-ish of 2024. It seemed like that was what CIG was aiming for the last couple of years, especially when they said so at CitizenCon. Even though they never said that specifically, they just sort of seemed to be hinting at it. But I also said that there would be some signs if this was the case. We'd start seeing advertising in places we normally wouldn't see Star Citizen content. So think Facebook, Squadron 42 ads on Twitch, that sort of thing. Actual ads for the game. At the moment, Star Citizen is mostly just word of mouth, with people already playing the game, dragging in friends and family and people they think might enjoy it. And yeah, probably some people dropping in out of curiosity based on YouTube vids, or Reddit or Facebook screenshot posts, or just picking up some rando on Twitch. But by and large, most people out there in the gaming world that aren't actively engaging with this project likely have little idea that it even exists. Or if they do, it's probably a negative opinion based on the long dev cycle and yeah, the rather vocal naysayers, which are made of both former backers who feel burned by the long development cycle and by people who are just following the meme. So CIG has some work to do to bring people into this project, and especially to give Squadron 42 a successful launch. Also, CIG is fighting against the nature of the game itself. I often say that Squadron 42 is a niche within a niche within a niche within a niche, and here's what I mean by that. Starting at the top, it's entertainment. So right off the bat, it's its own little area. Within that realm of entertainment, it's a computer game, a single-player game, a sci-fi game, a story-driven game, a flight simulator, plus a first-person shooter. You can sort of see what I mean is that that slice of the pie is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller with each iteration of that. Each circle in is going to limit the audience just a bit more. So the advertising blitz will have to be huge in order to convince, say, just a casual sci-fi enthusiast to buy in and give it a try. That'll take a serious ad blitz. It'll also probably follow the generally standard path of releasing an early chapter of Vertical Slice to big streamers to try out, both to get their feedback, but also the eyeballs of their audience on the project. I know in my case, there's been some game a streamer will be saying, this game sucks, but I'll be watching it and say, well, it looks like it's right up my alley. And that could happen with Star Citizen too, is that I wouldn't necessarily say any media attention is good media attention, but it might be in this case. And to this point, we haven't seen any of that. And you'd probably want to start doing that kind of hardcore advertising about 6 months out at the latest. And now we're roughly about 3 months out. Considering that CR went out and got venture capitalist funding specifically for advertising, and we haven't really seen any advertising yet, yeah, with that in mind, I don't think Squadron 42 is dropping this year. So let's move on to the game itself. Squadron 42 also has some work to do with the community itself. It's pretty safe to say that most of the community is more interested in the PU than Squadron 42. And that makes a lot of sense since the PU is all that we have in our hands right now. Pretty safe bet that most of the people playing the game right now are more interested in the MMO than the single player game. There will definitely be people like myself that are looking forward to both and will play both, but there's definitely no shortage of people who feel that Squadron 42 has been a drain on resources for the PU. Definitely in the last 3 years or so, this has definitely been the case, as most of the focus of CIG has shifted to getting Squadron 42 out the door, while development on the PU has slowed way down. That said, research and development for Squadron 42 are now being applied to the PU, and that certainly holds true going the other way too, with CIG using the PU as a test bed for mechanics that they're eventually going to put in Squadron 42. While none of us have played Squadron 42, anyone who's played the PU in the last few years has effectively been a beta tester for the features in that game, in Squadron 42, whether they wanted to be or not. So CIG might have some work to do within the community too, although that's a bit of an easier haul than the negative attention CIG has gotten outside of the community. I think even most of the die-hard PU fans will at least give Squadron 42 ye old college try, even if they don't do a complete playthrough, just to see what the in-game mechanics will be like. But what about replayability? How engaging do I think Squadron 42 will be? Well, let's get into that. So, with all of that behind us, let's talk about the actual game itself, or at least what I think the actual game itself will be. CIG's played Squadron 42 pretty close to the vest to this point, but of course there's been leaks. An actual leak of the entire storyline, at least as it was around, I think, 8 years ago. And I guarantee that that is a bit out of date, but the broader strokes are probably still accurate. And no, I haven't spoiled it for myself to this point. The short version, without any spoilers, is that the story won't be some twist-laden affair you never saw coming. Granted, Heart of the Tiger with its Hob twist, which I'm still not over, Chris, but I wouldn't bet on something similar happening in Squadron 42, so don't hold your breath for Mark Hamill to turn out to be the big bad in the series, I guess is what I'm saying. Still, Dave Haddock and the lore team are all pretty good writers. At least I've liked their stories that have shown up on Spectrum. And while there's an Academy Award winner in the cast, I don't expect this thing to win any awards or break any big boundaries. Or at least doesn't break big boundaries in the story or the way the story is told. I don't think it'll be some mind-bending experience. But breaking boundaries in tech, yeah, I think that's a pretty good chance considering that CIG has already advanced the tech level on this engine beyond things that other games are doing right now. And I think that'll probably hold for a couple years. So Squadron 42 drops in the next 6 to 8 months, they're still going to be well ahead of the curve in that sense. I still expect the story to at least be engaging after this long in the pot. And just as a reminder, and what we're getting whenever this thing drops is just part 1. There'll be 2 more parts coming behind it. Good thing with those is that the hard part's done. The engine is made, so they just need to flesh out the levels and encounters and balance things out. Sure, there'll probably be a few mechanics they'll throw at it, a new ship or 2 or 10, but it's not going to be 10 years between the installments. At least it better not. One of the things that even PU only players can look forward to is the experience itself. So let me explain that. While the game will probably mostly be on rails, and yeah, I'll get there in a second, there will still be plenty to explore within the relationships you can have on the ship, actions you can take, probably side missions you can pass or fail that don't impact the larger story, but could be fun side quests. Will it be Baldur's Gate level of replayability? Nah. But I suspect people could play through it a handful of different ways. I suspect even if the launch of 4.0 and server meshing is rocky, and I suspect it probably will be, at least initially, it'll give people something to do that's at least starts as an adjacent. And that brings me to my next point. Whether you're a person that's just interested in the PU or not, Squadron 42 will have something to offer you. At its core, Squadron 42 will be the purest, most distilled version of the game. A lot of us have suspected, and the devs have largely confirmed, that the biggest roadblock to the game's performance, the number of loops they bring in, the complexity of the mechanics, that sort of thing, has been the servers. Well, guess what? In a single-player game, that's no longer an issue. So the limitations of what you will see in Squadron 42 will be entirely dependent on what kind of rig you're running. but that performance won't entirely be on how the servers are feeling that night. Yeah, this will be a best case scenario for how the verse, the PU, should perform if the servers were working perfectly. So if the NPCs are standing on chairs in Squadron 42, yeah, that's a huge problem. Same thing with flying in combat. Squadron 42 can't blame desync after all. So if the combat feels bad, that's a bad sign for the PU. It's not all bad though, because the opposite is true too. I think most of us playing this game have landed ourselves on a brand spanking new server at some point and seen what the NPCs can do when they're not being hampered by the server. They can be downright terrifying. And if that's the case in Squadron 42, it's a great sign that if they can get server meshing working, that's the kind of experience that we'll have in the PU eventually. So there's a lot to cautiously look forward to in this game, even for those of us who don't really care about Squadron 42 as a primary experience and are really just here for the MMO. Finally, let's get back to that on-rails thing. That Baldur's Gate comparison might not work for the replayability, but I think it'll probably fit for the plot and the way that the game progresses. While there are side quests in Baldur's Gate, they're largely contained. Just Squadron 42 will be a military game. You won't be able to just Skyrim it up and meander off wherever you want to go. You're going to be given missions and you'll have to more or less follow those missions. Oh, I totally think there will be side quests and times you can go out and go do your own thing or do a hidden side mission or just take a bit and explore this place or that place. That'll be totally optional, but I highly doubt we'll be pulling into Odin's system and then just allowed to tool off on our own in our UE Naval Gladius. It's just not that kind of game. Now, do I think there might be a couple times where we'll get, say, shot down or forced to land planetside and find our way from point A to point B, or see what that anomaly is, or explore that station in a way that we see fit? I mean, yeah, sure, but I don't think we're getting an unexplored Stanton system and kicked through the door. This will be a cultivated experience, maybe not entirely on rails, but you'll be moving through a set story. At a guess, you won't even have as much freedom as in, say, Cyberpunk. In that game, if you haven't played it, or if you haven't watched my totally amazing playthrough of it, which is actually one of the first things I ever did on this channel, so please don't. There is a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Friends become enemies, enemies become friends, etc. But you do have a ton of freedom to explore Night City and the surrounding locales. You actually kind of have to just to get enough XP to actually survive the climax of Cyberpunk. That probably won't be the case in Squadron 42. First of all, there is no XP. They'll definitely build in some extra content for people. And I'll suspect people who want to 100% the game will chew up tons of hours doing so. But I also think people will be able to just jet straight through the story without a lot of deviation, and they won't necessarily be punished for it. At a guess, I don't think that this game strikes me as the kind of game that'll inspire a lot of YouTube vids of, oh my god, don't skip this one neat trick to get the Power 1000 weapon at level 1 type thing. This is more meant to be a military simulation with, say, a Star Wars-esque feel to it. CR is a huge fan of 80s sci-fi shows and movies, like a lot of us of a certain age are, and I fully expect this game to fall firmly in that vein. For that matter, the PU is already largely like that. The game has physics, but they're tweaked in kind of a campy direction while trying to toe the line of realism, at least on the surface. So, I mean, the whole distance that combat engages in is far from realistic, but it's what the game is settled on because it produces a certain aesthetic. That's just kind of what sci-fi shows were like in the 80s. So you might not be on rails exactly, but you'll be on, say, a wide road. Do I think it'll be fun? Well, considering its big competition at this point is Starfield, I think it'll definitely be better than that train wreck. I hope so anyways. Also did a playthrough on that one, which you can watch that too. For the future of CIG's sake, if nothing else, I certainly hope they clear that bar. Still, CIG has shown they will listen to their community, which is good. And they've definitely changed the game over time to take a lot of our asks into account. So that potentially says good things about what Squadron 42 will and won't be. At the end of the day, we'll just have to wait and see. And that's all I got for this one, gang. Let me know what your expectations are down below. Are you going to play Squadron 42? Breathe a sigh of relief that it's off CIG's table so they can focus down the PU? Something else? Let me know. Catch me next time.